Great. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for putting in some time tonight for the supporting the Master Naturalist and the educations, ongoing educations that we have here, or that Christy puts on. I see some familiar faces. It's good to see some of y'all again. I see some new faces. A little bit about me. My name's Travis. Travis Brady. With Gwen as a fall of 22 cohort, so I'm still in training. Haven't quite completed all my hours of education or volunteering yet, but working on that. My 9 to 5 job, I'm the director of operations at Greenberg Nature Center, which is in southern Westchester County. We're a very active nature center, do about 1,500 school programs a year, and everything from animal ecology to wildlife ecology to water and soil and forest ecology. Anything nature, animals, sustainability wise is kind of what we focus on. I've been there for going on almost 17 years now. Outside of that, prior to that, I've worked at a number of different zoos and farms and exotic animal parks. Everything's been with animals, wildlife as well as domestic. So it's kind of been my background. I also own my own business called Mosaic Wildlife Services. I do a little bit of wildlife rehabilitation, licensed by the state. I'm also a state licensed wildlife trapper. But a lot of it's just on focusing on the education again. I go around to the schools and libraries and anywhere they'll have me and, kind of share the word about living a little bit more harmoniously with nature and how we can all get along. Also put down that I'm a lifelong kid and adventure. And by that, I mean, I always have that sense of it, wanting to go out and explore, always a sense of wonder. And a lot of that helps me with the animal tracking. So tonight we're going to go over a little bit of the history of it, the basics of what tracks are and some of the tips and tricks of it. But along the way, tracking is for me, a very effective tool to get outside and understand a little bit more of our natural environment, which I think is a little bit about why we all are in the Master Naturalist program, is just have a better understanding where are we living and what are we living with. So first and foremost, tracking should be fun. You're outside, you're exploring, you're looking at critters and things and wildlife and plants. It should be fun. And I'm gonna pull up a comic. You may remember the Family Circus comic with Billy. And the author of this comic strip is Bill Keane. And he is the first one to use this dotted line kind of concept within the comics. And this is a good visual of what Billy was up to. Looks like he's trying to catch a monarch butterfly or something, but you can kind of see the tracks or his path that he left, over Dad, through the pool, down the slide, all around. You can kind of get an idea. You can start reading the story of this. And the next one is another Family Circus slide, but it's the same concept of the dotted lines, but it actually has a little bit more reading into it. You read a little bit more of what's going on. From the time he got out of bed all through his day and back into bed, all within his dream, of course. But his tracks and his trails tell a story, telling what happened to him throughout the day. And that's a little bit about what tracking is. When we track, this is a quote from Tom Brown. When we track, we pick up a string. At the far end of that string is a being that's moving, existing, and still connected to the track upon which we look. And Tom Brown's a very famous tracker. He's done a lot of work with getting people to not only understanding tracking, but to understand the connections with the land and reading the behavior of the animals. So this swan, you can kind of see the tracks of it in the snow, a little bit like Billy's dotted lines in the comic strip. So history. When you think about history, I'd like to hear maybe a little bit from some of you what some of your thoughts are about where tracking began or why it came into being. Anyone have any thoughts or ideas?
Hunting.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I said hunting.
Hunting? Yep. Anybody else? Well, that's pretty much it. And tracking goes back many, many millennia, and it all comes from the Kalahari Bushmen, the indigenous people of Australia, they are some of the world-renowned best trackers out there. And when you ask them, or any great tracking culture, how or why they became so good, the answer is always the same all the way across the world. It's we're hungry. You have to eat. But the tracking, it also teaches people about their environment. Trackers, the early trackers, were out there hunting down their food, but they were also learning about some of the potential dangers in the area, because they were often being hunted as well from time to time. And thinking about it this way, everyone that's on this call tonight and everyone in the world, somewhere along the line, one of our ancestors got good at tracking. If they didn't, we wouldn't be here. The tracking is very important. But today, we don't really track so much to put food on our table, at least in our culture, but we can use it to better understand our environment and what's going on. Animal tracking, it lures us into a journey of the natural world. And it encourages us to open up all of our senses, not just our eyes, but our hearing and actually our smell sometimes, and actually our touch. It uses all of our senses in it. And it's you have to know a little bit about the animal, about the environment, about the anatomy, about ethnobotany. So you kind of bring all of the master naturalist skills together whenever you track. So why should we track? I could say why shouldn't we track, but it's kind of one of my favorite things to do is get out there and learn a little bit. But some of the reasons that we do track: we survey animal populations. We find evidence of rare species. Tracking can be applied by any outdoor enthusiast, by any naturalist, for any number of reasons. If you're a photographer, it's easier to get closer to some of that elusive wildlife, if you know how to track and track quietly. We use a lot in studying group behavior of animals. There's something called a trap and mark and recapture, where you either take photos of an animal and document their stripes or their dots, and then you monitor them throughout time and see how they keep coming back. But tracking is used quite a bit in the scientific world now. So let's talk a little bit about what tracks are. So here's a photo of a track, pretty basic. So it's an imprint of an animal's foot, pretty straightforward. But also it has a record of the animal's movement. So when we get beyond just identifying the track, it gives us a little bit more information about what's going on. So sometimes the track is like in the mud like this, sometimes it's in the snow, sometimes it's just a layer of dust that the footprint leaves behind. If you walk out into the snow with your boots on and come back into the house, you may leave a track of that boot print of snow in your house. So it could be a positive or a negative track. And then tracks also give us clues about the animal and about their behavior. So when an animal is very calm and comfortable, we call that being in their baseline. They're doing their normal everyday behaviors, they're doing their normal movements. And we need to when we start tracking, we need to learn what the baseline movements and tracks look like for all of these animals. And then after a while, you start to learn anything that may deviate from that. But when you learn the baseline behaviors, you make big steps into interpreting the tracks, in recognizing the moods of the animals, and start weaving stories out of those footprints that you're looking at. So here's a line of tracks here. Now, these tracks are actually about 115 million years old. These are from some fossilized dinosaur tracks. So I'm not sure whose quote this is. I've seen it a couple different times in a couple different places, but I like it. And it kind of works really well with the concept of tracking that I try to work through. So, you have to start small. It's kind of like your ABCs, it's learning track ID. And then you can work up to simple sentences and paragraphs in funny book. So you may work up to a track identification. It may lead a little bit more to where it came from and where is it going. Was it traveling alone? Was it traveling in groups? Was it male? Was it female? How was it feeling? Was it injured? Was it pregnant? So all that stuff can kind of come through tracks if you're able to decipher the clues that are in them. So they have a lot of stories to tell, but you really have to take time to slow down and read them and decipher them. So what you won't learn in this program. I don't really teach track identification. I think that is something that you should teach yourself. Go and get yourself a nice little guide or 2 or 3 guides, and get out there and something I call a dirt time. Get out there and put the time in on the ground and teach yourself the tracks. It's the most basic of learning how to track is track identification. What animal left this track? So you got to get dirty. You got to get out there and get the dirt time in. It's very, very valuable. And you can't, it's like reading the book. You can't read a book until you know your ABC. So you can't really start deciphering some of the stories within these tracks until you are able to identify them. So some of the good guides I like are you got Tom Brown's observation and tracking. Stokes is really good. And then Scats and Tracks of the Northeast. We'll get a little bit more into the Scats a little bit later on. But these are some really good guides. They're not the only ones by any means, but these are good because a lot of guides just give you the tracks and the ID, where to really learn how to track and get those stories, you have to know a little bit more about the behavior of the animal, about the ecology of the land that they're living in. And these books go into that a little bit more. So I appreciate these books myself. All right. As you start to track, I actually have a backpack. I don't have it with me, but it has all my tracking gear into it. And some of the stuff that I have in there are flashlights, tape measures. Certainly I have a tracking stick here. It's just like a big dowel, wooden dowel. It's like a hiking stick of sorts, but I have little hair bands on it that I can slide. And these help me to maybe measure the length of the track, measure the width of the track, measure the stride. And if I know a track is every 10 inches, and I find one here, then I find the next one, I find the next one, and the next one I'm not able to find, but I know everyone's been 10 or 11 inches apart, I can use my tracking stick to help me find a distance that it should be there, where it should be. It helps me to find it a little bit better. And on that point, it's easy to see the tracks that are clear, but that doesn't really make you any better. But finding the tracks that aren't there, they're there, but the ones that are hard to see, getting down and really studying, like it should be here. I know it should be in this area, but where is it? That's how you become a much better tracker. It's looking for the tracks you can't see. The flashlight I mentioned because actually I have a slide for that. I'll get to that in a little bit. But the flags and popsicle sticks, I use yard flags, a little like pink and orange flags on a little metal stake. Sometimes I'll have popsicle sticks that are colored, that are sharpened in the point. So I use them and just, if I'm looking at a set of tracks across a field or across the lawn, I can look at one at a time, or I can start flagging them. And as I stand back, I could kind of get a little bit more of a sense of the flow of the animal, where it was going, what kind of speed it was taking. Was it galloping? Was it running? And you can kind of, with the flags there, you can kind of see where the tracks are a little bit better. I always have a journal with me. I always sketch all my tracks out. I actually have, where is it? I have this little thing that it's going to be in another slide. It's kind of like a picture frame that I made with some of the tracks in the area. It's got a ruler here that I can measure my width and length. And then I also laminate this and give it to people so I could set it over a track and either sketch it out or kind of get a little bit more measurements on it. It's a really good tool to have. But having a journal also helps you to sketch it out. And you can take notes about the temperature, the humidity, all that starts to matter, especially when you start aging the tracks. Because, it snowed, and if the snow starts to melt, that track changes quite a bit. So you need to be able to start to age and see how the track weathers. I always have a pair like a small little gloves, in case I want to pick up and get a little bit more intimate with some scat or rotten bones or something like that. You just want to be, protect yourself. And if I find a cool skull or something, then I'll want a Ziploc bag to put it in and keep it kind of safe and clean from everything else. Always make sure you have water. And sometimes I even take plaster of Paris with me if you want to start to collect some of the tracks. You can mix a little plaster of Paris, pour it into the track in just a few minutes. It kind of sets up nice, and you can pull it back out, and then you have an inverse replica of the track that you just saw. I do a lot of baking. I make a lot of cheesecakes, and they have these little mini springform pans that work out really, really well. You can set it right over the track, pour the plaster of Paris into it. It holds it together. And after it dries, you pull it out and you have a nice, everything's uniforms, brown, and the tracks are there, and I can label the back of it. It works out really well. So when you start tracking, there's a lot of things to think about. The main thing is watch your step. You don't want to be traipsing around and looking for some of these tracks are really hard to find and hard to see sometimes, and to find out that you've just been stepping all over it. So you got to be a little bit more mindful and slow down a little bit and just be careful about where you're stepping. So here we are looking at different parts of a track. So on the, if we look over here on the left-hand side, it's a very basic, probably a canine track of some sort. So you got your 4 toes, it shows your claws, shows outer and inner toes, heel pads, and the space in the middle is called the negative space. It's very important in trying to ID some of the different animals later on, but the negative space is fairly important. Now, if this is where the track is at, the track is actually down here on the bottom, but then you have this bit of a slope. You hear it's called a wall. I call it a slope. And at the top of it's going to be a little bit wider. For most people, the difference of the width from the top of the wall to the bottom of the true track is minimal, and it doesn't really matter. There are a few situations where you have some species that are kind of similar, and knowing the exact true track width will matter. But for most people, it's just something good to know that it's out there. It's been, sometimes with the coyotes moving into our area around here, some of the coyotes and our dogs can kind of present fairly similar. There's some things that can tell them apart. The direction that the toes curve in. It's a little bit more oval on a coyote versus a dog. But getting the size down helps them quite a bit. All right. So here's just a picture of a track. Pretty much a photo of what we just looked at in the graphic. You got your heel pad right here. You got your 4 toes. You got very clear defined claws up in here. And this would be that negative space, all right? And that negative space, the width and depth of it matters on identifying some of the species. So whoever said you could track in mud, here's a great example of tracking in mud as opposed to just in the snow. Because those Kalahari Bushmen and Aboriginals from Australia, they had dry, sandy, arid environments, and that's great for tracking. Very, very different environment from up here in the Northeast. You try to start tracking in the Northeast forest, you do not get picture perfect tracks like this very often. It's almost like a rare jewel to be able to find a true track in the forest. So I'm just seeing some of these comments real quick. Sorry, just catching up there. All right. Yep. It's not going back. There we go. Measuring. So we got a nice track here. This looks to be a bear track or something. So you want to measure the width and the length of it. And you measure it on the width from the outer part of each side. So this one, if we take a look at that, it looks like it's going to be somewhere around 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5.5 inches wide, which is a pretty big track. And long, it's a little bit longer than that, maybe 7.5 inches long. But you measure it out to the tips of the claws, not just where the toe pad's in. You can go all the way out to the tips of the claws to where you would measure. So width would be from here to here, and length would be from all the way back here to up in here. And that helps you to identify the tracks as you're starting to learn. Sorry. So this is that same graphic I showed you earlier. I got the idea from someone else many, many years ago, and I just kind of tweaked it myself, added a few different things. I'm happy to share this later if anyone wants it. I just cut out that center area right through here. Like I said, then I laminate it, and then it kind of gives me a nice little quick IDs of some of the animals that are in my area. It gives me the size and width of it. And it gives me a little bit of facts. And I could sketch it. I could use it like either a Sharpie or a dry erase marker and write right on top of the lamination sheets if I want to take it back home with me. Yes, I'll make sure I get copies out to all of those, to everyone. All right. So when you start looking at tracks, there's a couple different things that we could do. Looking at the direction of travel is fairly important to start understanding the story. And for most tracks, that's fairly straightforward. In whichever way the toes or the nails are pointing, or the way that the direction that the animals are moving. But then there's other things to measure too, like a stride and the register and the straddle. And I got some slides to show these off in just a second. All right. So here we're looking at stride. So we got a set of tracks. We got a right hind foot, left hind foot, right front foot. Nice. Right hind, left front, left hind, right front, and so forth. So to measure the stride, you're pretty much looking at from the same foot. So the back of the right hind foot all the way up to the back of the next right hind foot track. That gives you the distance of the stride. And you could take this and extrapolate it out quite a bit more depending on how high the hip joint is and the speed that the animal is moving. There's a lot more specific kind of STEMmy thinking science you could do with this. I know a lot of the anthropologists do it to figure out the height, hip height of some of the dinosaurs, and maybe how fast they were moving. But for most of us, just knowing the stride helps us to know the size of the animal we're dealing with. So in addition to the stride, you have the register. And the register is the direct register where you have the back paw fits directly into the front paw track. So you have two tracks, but they're sitting on top of each other. So it looks like it's a single track or a track and a track. And this is a good sample of that. No, if you look at this on very quick basis, you would think that's a bipedal animal, something with just 2 feet that walks kind of like a human. But that's not the case. This is certainly a quadruped that has 4 feet. It's just that those back feet are direct register into the front of the front track. So, if you're trying to figure out what the animal is, sometimes the tracks are bigger than what they should be because the back foot and the front track make the track look a little bit bigger than it really is. So it's just something you have to be a little bit more cautious about. And in addition to the way this animal's walking, you can see the stride length pretty easily. You could go from, the back of this track here to the back of this one here, and that would be the stride distance there. But then there's another one that can go called the strata. We'll get to a second, which goes for the width of the trail. There are a couple of tracks. Someone's asking, is that a tail drag? That's a good observation. It probably is not a tail drag. That's probably just a lazy foot that's being dropped in there. It could be I would probably think it's more of just a lazy foot moving through across the top of the snow. And what animal made this? A lot of cats do a lot of direct register, and it's a very narrow thing. So I would probably say this is some sort of feline. But in looking at the way this animal's moving, this next slide has a couple different gaits and patterns. They got the pace, diagonal. They may have different names, bounders and gallops. So one thing around here that we see a lot is a lot of the squirrels and the rabbits have very similar tracks in the snow. They look very, very similar. You got feet here and feet here, but on squirrels and rabbits, oddly enough, the feet that are in the front are most often not the hind feet, and the front feet are falling in the back. So they'll put the front feet down and then move the back feet from back here all the way up here to jump in front of their front feet. And squirrels, you often see their front feet side by side like this, whereas rabbits, you'll find that one of the back feet is kind of on more of a diagonal like this. It's a pretty classic way to determine between squirrels and rabbits. I was teaching a tracking class many years ago, and someone was tracking what they thought was a rabbit, and they tracked it beautifully all through the snow, across the lawn, and it came right up to a tree and it just stopped. And she could not figure out where this animal went. She goes, I found every other track, and it's clean snow where this animal just disappeared. I'm like, are you sure it was a rabbit? She goes, yeah, I'm sure it's a rabbit. So I made her think about it for a little bit. And finally it came to where that wasn't a rabbit and it's a squirrel that just climbed right up the tree. So, sometimes you have to be a little bit more aware of your environment. Sometimes it's easy to get so tied into looking at the tracks that we forget to take in the whole surrounding environment. And it's good to slow down sometimes and take a little bit more in. But knowing some of the different gait patterns is very helpful. All right, so this is the straddle I was mentioning earlier. We got a couple tracks here. We got one that's being measured here, got a track here, and a track here, and a track here. So the width from the outside to the outside and that's the width of the trail, kind of gives you the idea of the width of the shoulders or the hips of the animals as well. And that's called the straddle. Now, as we look here, there's a couple things to look at. They're certainly doing a good job on measuring the track back here, measuring that, but there's also all this shadow stuff that's in play here. All right, shadows become very important whenever you're looking at tracks. You should always keep the track between you and your source of light, which is why I mentioned the flashlight earlier. So this is just it has nothing to do with tracking, really. It's just a bowl on a table. But if you look at it, it's a white bowl on a white table, but the shadow's on the far left of that bowl. So that means the light source is most likely to the far right, shining across the bowl. But if you look inside the bowl, the depression that the bowl makes, inside here, the shadow is actually reversed. So the light is coming over the bowl, hitting this side, but leaving the back side of the bowl in the shadows. And that's exactly what happens in these tracks as well. So right here, this track is half in the light and half in the shade. So the sunlight from here would be coming from the top, coming across the track and casting its light here. If you get between yourself and the light, then your body throws shadow over the entire track, and it becomes really hard to see them sometimes. So you always want to try to keep the track between you and the light source, normally the sun, and then also I take a flashlight with me as well. So shinings and dullings, these are some of the fun things to look at when I'm looking at tracking. A dulling, think about dulling is in dew, like over here on the left-hand side. Early mornings when the grass is still a little bit wet, you walk through it, you can see exactly the whole track and trail of the animal that went through. Shinings are a little bit harder to explain and a little bit harder to see. They're a little bit more of a shiny thing in grass. If you step on grass and then step off of it, the grass is a little shiny for a few minutes. Excuse me, sometimes up to an hour or so. It can be a little bit shiny, but you can kind of see a little bit of a shining right through here. And then it looks like something else might have came through here as well. But this looks to be a little bit more of a warm path, whereas this is not so much a warm path. This is more of the shining. All right. Tracks can be put in different types of substrate. We were talking about this a little bit earlier, that the snow is a great thing to track in. So is sand, so is mud. But you can also track right across the blacktop and asphalt and concrete as well, if you know what you're looking for. But speaking of tracking in mud, you need to be careful. I've asked a lot of people how many toes a deer has on its foot, and more often than not, they'll say two, because that's what they're used to seeing. Deer actually have 4 toes. They have the 2 dew claws back here, but they very rarely register unless they're in really deep mud or it's a really heavy deer that's sinking down into the substrate. So most of the time we only see the 2 up here, but if it's heavy, deep mud and a heavy animal, the dew claws will actually register as well. So we have a track here, which is kind of hard to see what it is. It has a bit of an oval shape. It looks like there might be some of that negative space in between the toe pads and the heel pads. Maybe some claw marks up here. It's kind of hard to tell. So the idea of timing and weathering is very important. One thing that I like to do is I'll actually build a tracking pit. It's like pretty much a sandbox. You can fill it full of sand. You can do it with mud. You can do it with leaves, just different substrates. And then you could go walk through it or have your dog walk through it or whatever, and then date that track and then watch how it erodes over time. over the course of a day, if it's a really hot sun, or over the course of a week, or a course of 3 rainstorms, how do those different elements and temperatures affect the erosion of that track? So this right here, no, this is actually another deer track is what it was. It's just that the snow has started to melt. If you say deer, you can kind of see the 2 hooves, here now. But without it, just a quick glance, it could be like another canine or something like that as well. But being aware of the weathering. And timing is, tracks can help you time a lot of stuff. So we have 2 different tracks here. We have a car track from a tire, and then we have probably a domestic dog by the looks of it. And which one was here first? That's a good thing to know sometimes. Especially when you're looking at 2 different animals. Let's say if you have a predator track and a prey track, which one was there first? Who's tracking who, or who's getting away from the other? You start to decipher that story. So, this dog track is on top of the tire track. So it's very clear that the tire was there first, and then the dog was there afterwards. Another way to think about this is if you have a nice, beautiful track and then it rains, that rain is going to have pock marks all in the dirt around it. Have it in that track as well, unless the track was put down after the rain. So let's say it rained until 1 o'clock this morning, and then I get up and start tracking tomorrow. I see some beautiful tracks out there that are not pock marked from the rain. Then I know they happen after that 1 o'clock rain stopped. So temperature, humidity, all of that stuff kind of matters. All right, we're going to tracking pyramid. You kind of know the idea of like a nutrition or food pyramid, but tracking pyramid has something very similar. And this is where it gets more from individual track ID to understanding a little bit more about the whole ecosystem. So you can start at the bottom with like your bioregion. And around here, our northeast bioregion is it's pretty varied, but a lot of mixed forest that we have up here. It can be broken down to smaller ecoregions. But whatever, we have a lot of forest here. Above that, you got a little bit of a habitat. We could think maybe the Adirondack high peaks, some of the alpine peaks could be a specific habitat within a mixed forest. So you're starting to know your area that you're working in. And if we are only tracking here in the Northeast, then we don't really have to worry about learning new one of these. But if I go to the Pacific Northwest, I'm gonna have to rethink my bioregion and my habitats and some of the animals that are there. So if you think about some of the animals in the Adirondack high peaks, you might start thinking, martins and fishers and things like that, which we may not have too much of down here in southern Westchester, although we're starting to see a few of them come back in. Then you can get into microhabitat, you can get into the track signs and patterns, and then you can get into the individual tracks. And then I like to think that you actually get into the individuals and the behaviors after that. All right, but knowing all of this stuff in the tracking pyramid helps you to be a better tracker, but also helps you to be a better naturalist as well. Now, I mentioned earlier that the Northeast forest is not a primary to track. It's very hard to find tracks, and it's very hard to see them and study them, but there are signs. And I actually grew up tracking without ever using tracks. I use more of the signs. And there's a lot of different signs that you can have. I've got a few examples here, like feeding sign. If we think about that, then maybe the carcass of an animal, right? I can maybe see, feathers of a bird that have been plucked out, or the fur of a rabbit. In this case, I got something looks like some acorns that have been chewed up. So this tells me that it's probably going to be a small animal. A deer or turkey would eat these things whole. So maybe this is a smaller mammal that's been eating on these, a mouse or a vole, something like that. So scat, I love looking at scat. I can do a whole nother talk on just how much I like getting into the scat, because it tells you so much information about the animal, about the plants that are in the area, about the other animals that are in the area as well. So here we got scat. This looks to be fairly dried out. Looks like it has a lot of fur in there. So this is probably most likely from a predator that was eating something else. So there's a lot of information there. We start breaking it apart and maybe finding some other bones and berries and things like that. We might can figure some more information out. Someone asking about coyote. I just ripped this photo offline. I just saw it, but coyotes do taper down. They come down to a little point like this, so it very well could be. but I'm not positive, to be honest. Go to chat here. What causes the white on the scat? That can happen from a couple different things. Sometimes it's just from whatever's been eaten. Sometimes it's the color of the fur. Sometimes if an animal eats a lot of bone, you'll see a lot of the calcium come through. But this looks like it's just the fur on this one. Some other signs that you have is the trails and the travel routes. This is very helpful if you're trying to actually start, you could track and identify the animal, and then you can start trailing the animal, trying to find it or find where it came from. All right, chat up here. Maybe we can do a webinar on scat. I'll consider that. All right, so here's a trail. It's pretty clear. It's in a very young forest, a lot of small trees in there. So you can read the forest as well as reading the track. So, this is either new growth or logged fairly recently. So I'm not sure why they choose it so small, but the animals have clearly picked what I would consider the path of least resistance cutting through there. And I like to think about some of these trails like a highway of that we all use for our cars. We have hundreds and thousands of cars on the highway, but then less of them come off into the road into my town, and then even less come into my driveway. So, I use a lot of these game trails to kind of pick up on what's in the area. Then I start looking at some of these side branching trails to figure out a little bit more of the specific animals that's used in this one. So just like us, animals need to rest from time to time. They need to have shelters, dens, all different things. This is a nice little, some animal bedded down out here. I don't know who Jonah Evans is. Like I said, I ripped some of these photos off the internet. So this is not my photo. Marketing, advertising. This is one of my photos. This is, any ideas what this might be? Bear, yep, exactly. That's bear marks right there. So this is actually out in California, and is very, very recent. So you can see how clean and fresh these marks are. So I have another, yeah, there it is. So this is also bear, same trip, same trail, but these marks are a little bit older. They've already starting to scab over and weep the sap a little bit more. So if I'm fresh to an area and I'm seeing a lot of these, I'm gonna be a little bit more on alert. Not that I wouldn't be on alert anytime I'm in bear habitat, but I knew that this is quite a bit more recent. Does anyone know why they do that? That's a great question. So hang on a second. So a lot of animals try to hide their presence, especially if you're a prey animal. But other animals highlight it. Coyotes are known for dropping their scat on top of a rock or top of a stump. It's almost like a trail marker, almost like a flag. They mark their territory. So bears are known to mark territory like that as well. Yep, Mark got it. Marking territory. All right. So, but in addition to tracks, we have all these signs, but there's so many more signs. This is pretty clear. This is a beaver tree. You see this, it doesn't take much effort to know who did that and what's in the area. Here's another one. Tracks can only give you so much information, but the signs give you so much more. Here's another one, dropped antler of a deer. You start looking, that's actually the right-hand side antler there. So, that's most likely a buck. Very, very, very few white-tailed does grow antlers. It's been known to happen from time to time, but most often around here, only the bucks have antlers. And the neat thing about deer and some other animals, the bucks actually have wider shoulders, so their front feet are a little bit wider apart when you see their tracks. But the does have wider hips, so their back feet are a little bit wider than the males would be. But you kind of need to have a group of animals in play to kind of see all those tracks together to actually start deciphering that. All right, here's a burrow of something, maybe a fox. Fox and coyotes often, and groundhogs will do it too, but that doesn't quite look like a groundhog to me. They excavate all that soil, so you get all this fresh soil right out front, like their doormat. Shed snake skin. And there's so many more signs in our tracks, and it's very important to be able to read into them. Oh, this is a good one. It's in snow, but it's not a track. I would call this more of a sign, but it could be tricky if you're not used to having these animals around. Any guesses here? And these are two different ones. I'll just be a little bit upfront about that. There's two different ones. All right, we got a vole is good. This is actually quite a bit bigger. This is actually this picture is a little otter. There you go. These are otter slides. Yep. Linda, Laura, a lot of people got the otter there. Yep. But yep, the otters are using it as a slide. All right. Right, there's a empty turtle shell there. Looks to be an aquatic, either I don't know if it's painted turtle or whatever, but certainly in an aquatic habitat. Here's some more feeding signs. Something kind of got decimated there. I can't tell if that's looks like it might be fur. Here's the animal in question, but we also see a lot of signs where it's stuffing the seeds and nuts into the hollowed out trees. And I like this photo. Not all signs are something visual. I mentioned earlier that sometimes it's sound, sometimes it's smell. Cats and felines are well known for marking, for spraying. I worked at a number of different zoos, and one of the first things you learn is to be careful around the back end of the tigers. They'll spray you any chance they get. And they actually learn different people. They'll spray some people more than others. But here we have a bobcat that's marking a tree. So that smell is there. And humans, unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, don't have the olfactory sense that some of these animals do. But we can still pick up on some of these signs out here like this. Yeah, links, thanks. All right, back up. So I got a little bit of an application here. So what can we tell from this? It's clearly scat. We got a little bit of size. That's someone's fingers. And, if you don't have a ruler, you can always use something else like your keys or a boot or a phone to give a sense of reference on sizing. But, we got something else going on here. What do we have? Yep, lots of berries and seeds. So is this something that's going to be a predator eating other animals? Could be. Some of the omnivores are certainly that we meet will certainly still go after berries. Raccoons are known for it. Coyotes are known for it. But then we can start breaking this apart and actually looking at what the berries are, and helps us give us a better understanding of some of the plants that are in the area. If some of these plants or some of these seeds were brought in by bird droppings from over the ridge from one place to another. And then we might have an idea of where this animal's been traveling at. All right. So we got two gnawed limbs or stems here. They look pretty similar, but they're different enough to be able to see some differences in there. What are your thoughts here? Missy got it. Deer versus rabbit. The gardener's nightmare. Very true. But the one over here on the left is a little bit more jagged. It's not as clean cut. This is normally from a deer. Rabbits have a little bit sharper teeth, and rabbits have a little bit sharper teeth, and it's a little bit cleaner and crisper and a little bit more on a straight edge. So this is a good way to tell rabbits and deer apart. All right, so somebody's been chewing here. We got three different examples. Let's look at this first one over here first. This first one, and that's pretty clear. That's a beaver. We've seen beaver trees a lot, but this one is not so clear unless you. Oh, we got a chat. Let's see what we got. All right, we got beaver. All right, beaver, porcupine, and deer rubbing. All right, I'm gonna give you 2 out of 3 on that. Maybe 2 3/4. So let me just jump ahead to see what some of these are. Oh. So I threw that in, I just being a little goofy. But yes, it is a beaver on this one. You were absolutely right. That is a porcupine there in the middle. It's feeding up a little bit higher in the tree, and not quite a deer, but a very close relative. We got a moose there stripping out. They eat a lot of the bark. So again, it depends on where you live. You get a little bit further north and you see more porcupines than you do down here in the southern part of the county and the state, but we do have them around. The beavers are certainly coming back in, and we're starting to see a few more moose down here as well. But it's good to know the animals and know their behavior. But now we could get beyond the tracks. When you look at the tracks, you can identify the animal, but when you start to analyze it, you get a lot more information. It kind of fills your file cabinet or your database. And if you keep that information, then you could be able to start to see the tracks when they're not physically there. See some of the behaviors that are in the tracks that you don't see when they're not there. And I call this being able to see the unseen. And whenever you get to this point in tracking, it's when you can really start to get beyond the ABCs and the sentences and start reading those stories. To see that the tracks and identify it, and to see that it cuts across the field is one thing, but then to get into the animal's head, where was it coming from? Where was it going? Why? What was it feeling? Those are the things that we start to get into when we start to decipher them. One of the things I like to talk about here is I was a whitewater rafting guide for a couple of summers down in West Virginia, and we would do overnights down the river with our groups. And I was taking a group out rafting, and we had to pull over for our dinner, set up camp on the riverbank. We were going to spend the night out there on the river, which was a wonderful thing to do. And I saw some tracks. And I got really excited, me being the quasi-naturalist that I am, and these are bobcat. And I pointed them out to everybody. But then I started thinking they were right in the middle of the beach. They didn't follow the water line. They didn't follow the wood line. They just kind of right in the middle of the beach. And they did this very weird pattern. And it didn't bother me. I just couldn't figure it out. I cannot figure out why an animal that's kind of elusive and secretive as the bobcat would be right out in the open, not following some cover or following the water line. And I tried to wrap my head around it all the rest of that evening. I can't figure it out. Then, as we were getting into the night, the sunlight went down, the night came up, and the moonlight, the way it hit the mountain ridge, it followed that track that the bobcat was doing, followed the exact shadow line of the mountain ridge that was cast by the moon. So it was following in something with some cover. It's just to cover the shadows that come out at nighttime. Chasing food. So it's a good idea of chasing food, but the tracks really did line up right in the shadow of the ridge line. So that's pretty special to me. All right. So beyond the tracks again, you can start looking at the tracks and figuring out, the species from another species, figure out which animal it is, and start getting into some of the subtleties that you can't get from the guidebooks. Guidebooks can only give you so much. There was a time when I was a young kid and I was going out deer hunting, and it was a super, super cold morning. It was a horrible morning to be out, cold and windy. And I knew the area pretty well. I knew there's a pine thicket back there. I knew a lot of the animals use that pine thicket to get out of the shelter, to shelter from the weather and the predators. And I was walking out there. It's before the sun came up. And I'm walking. I'm just getting colder and colder. And all I wanted to do was find some place to shelter and get out of the wind. And I was a few feet inside the edge of the pine thicket. I saw a nice big tree and I was freezing. I just want to sit down and kind of cut up. And I sat down next to this tree and kind of backed up into it. And then I felt around. The ground was all warm where I sat down. And just moments earlier, unbeknownst to me, I had spooked the deer that I was stalking. And it had been sitting there hunkered down all night long, doing the same thing that I was trying to do. So the deer and I were thinking the same thing. How can I get out of this wind? How can I protect myself? Where can I get warm? And that deer, unfortunately, I kicked him or her out of her seat, and I sat there for a couple more minutes. But it kind of gave me goosebumps sitting down that cold morning and having that ground still be warm from where the animal had just gotten up. So I'm going to chat up here. Thanks, Glenn. So as you're out tracking, there's a few things to be careful about. I kind of went over this. So you want to identify the track maker, analyze the track, and start interpreting messages. What was it doing? Was it hunting? Was it just passing? Where did it go? And why was it going? So these are the questions that you can start to, you can just decipher these questions from most other tracks, but it takes time. Like I said, it takes that dirt time. You got to be out there and putting your time into seeing what you can see and analyzing it. Sometimes I like to tell people, if you have dogs, just watch your dogs in the yard. Sit in the house, look at them through the window, sit on the porch, watch if they're playing, if they're wrestling, if they're just walking. And then when they're done, go out there and look in that exact spot where they just were. Unfortunately, the deer around here are so populous and habituated. You can watch deer in your front yard a lot of times. See if they're feeding, see how big the animal is, see if it's a male or female. Let them do their thing, and then go out there and look at their tracks. You got two sets of data now. You got the physical tracks that you're looking at, and then you have the behavior that you just witnessed from that animal, and you can kind of overlay them together and help build that information of your file cabinet, of your database a little bit more. So, it's nothing wrong with tracking people, see what people are doing on the playground. Go to the dog park. A great place to practice your tracking skills is at a dog park. You got all these different animals, different sizes, different shapes, different weights, different behaviors. The skittish animal is going to be over by the fence and behind the tree. The more aggressive animals are, kind of taking over the whole area. It's a great place to practice your skills. So when you're out there tracking, you still got to be aware of the surroundings. You got to be careful of yourself. There's a lot of things to look out for. Sunburn, the terrain. You're often off trail sometimes. So the rocky terrain. The scat is there. There's a lot of information in there, but sometimes there could be some germs in there too. So you always want to be aware of the scat. Poison ivy, ticks, bees, wasps, snates. Some of the animals, can certainly have rabies or other viruses like some of the mice. So you just got to be aware. Right. And you want to take your time. I mentioned the dirt time, and the snail certainly left its own little track there. The slime trail. There's a lot of information in there, but you got to take your time to figure out the nuances of some of these tracks. It takes time to learn the animals, learn their ecology, and that's kind of what we are out here doing ourselves all the time, anyhow. So it takes an understanding to get the ID, but it takes a little bit more time to pull it all together. And some people think tracking at a really high level is almost like magic or very mystical or something, and it's not. It's very scientific, actually, if you start looking at it. But it can seem kind of mystical to people who aren't paying that much attention to it. If I just went out to track, just ID the animal and see what the animal was and where it was going, I probably would have lost a lot of interest in tracking a long time ago, because it gets kind of not boring. It's just kind of after a while to identify the tracks, but to figure out some of these stories and to figure out the ecology. What were they eating? Where did they get that food? Were they hungry when they were looking, coming through the area? That sort of stuff keeps me motivated, keeps me out there wanting to track more. And I've discovered that teaches me a great deal more every time I'm out there. So we got one more slide here, tracking till the end. All right, certainly a story is going on here. I see a couple of different sets of tracks, and clearly it looks like a bird picked up its meal. Whether it's a hawk or something that came in and swooped up a squirrel, I have no idea, but there's a story there, and there's a lot of stuff to look at. So at its core, I'll wrap up real quick. Tracking depends on having a deep understanding and precisely how and why everything in nature is connected. Nothing lives in isolation. Learning to track at its deepest level can be kind of tricky, but it helps us to understand the seasonal cycles, the life cycles, the insects, the frogs. It's all tied in together through time and space there. And with all this ecological knowledge, trackers can get out and get close to animals by following their trail and by direct evidence. And sometimes you can actually anticipate where the animal is going to be and what they're going to do. And that's when you know you're getting pretty good at it, when you can anticipate what the animal is going to do and be there before they are. And the great thing about tracking is that it's fun, and it's fun to pass down. It's fun to mentor somebody in this. I've taught a lot of tracking, but I've never done it on Zoom before. So I actually had to reorder a lot of this stuff, because I actually do it in reverse order when I'm in person, and save the individual track stuff until we can get out into the field and try it. But thank you for your time. I'm happy to take any questions, or if anyone has anything they would like to share.
Thank you, Travis. That was both fun and informative. And there was a lot happening in the chat, but I think you may have covered
Yeah.
a lot of it as you went. Does anybody have any questions that you would like to ask or new messages to put in the chat?
I'll certainly share out maybe I'll send it to you, Christy, that document, that little kind of photo frame sort of thing, and you can send it out to everyone.
Okay, yes, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you. And if anyone ever wants to reach out to me, feel free to reach out to me on my email, and Christy can give it to you if you don't have it already. Happy to share more and go through scat or bones or whatever else you may want to go through. Actually brought some of my bones here. I always have them close by. This is a nice skull I found on a recent trip. A little snapping turtle, not little, kind of sizable snapping turtle. But you see there's no teeth. It kind of gives you a lot of information. These areas back here are where muscles attach, and it gives you a lot of strong biting force when they have these big holes in the back of the skull. So a lot of your predators have these big open gaps back here.
What was the most exciting track you ever found? That's my question to you.
You know what? I actually get when I'm teaching the young kids, we'll find a rotten log and we'll just roll over that log, because a lot of those macroinvertebrates or insects and arthropods, they don't travel that far. They stay underneath that log. Their whole life cycle is right there. So there's a lot of information in there. It just it's a little bit harder to decipher it. So learning to track some of these insects is kind of fun to do. But what's my favorite? No, I actually I got called out to track a kangaroo one time, and I was actually able to pick up its trail. And I got the people. We never found the animal, but I didn't find the animal. We did get them close to the direction of the animal, and then someone else was able to capture a little bit later. But
so where was the kangaroo?
Well, I worked in Georgia for a while for a kangaroo farm.
Okay.
And then I moved up here and started working at the Bronx Zoo. And then there was this was, I don't know, 2 decades ago now. There's a kangaroo that got loose, not from the zoo, but from someone's personal kangaroo that got loose in the city, and it was in one of the parks and so forth. So they said, "Oh, I think the new guy knows something about kangaroos." So I got called in to assist with that a little bit.
Well, that must have been fun.
It was. All right, someone asked if I do talks. Sure, I'm happy to help out anywhere, anytime. I see your email, so I'll follow up with you a little bit later on that, or you can reach out to me directly. And that's Adrian. Sure.
And Missy also asked, do you do programming at GNC?
Yeah, we do a lot of programming there, adult and kid. I do. Historically, we've been known for kind of that younger age group, kind of pre-K through about 8th grade. But the last several years, we've been branching out. I do a lot of stuff for Mercy College. They have a vet tech program, so I do a lot of their exotic animal talks for them. And then we do a lot of adult stuff as well, whether it's just on ecology or sustainability. So yeah, look up our website, come on by. Some people have already come by to visit and do a volunteering day already. So thank you for some of you that have come out.
I feel like I can't lose this opportunity. A couple of years ago, I ran across a sign that I stumped the state park naturalist, and it's just been bothering me for 2 years.
Do you have a photo of it?
I do. I'm wondering if Christy will allow me to share.
Sure.
Where
I think everyone can. Let's see.
So this was at Morrow State Park at the end of November 2 years ago. And we found a few of them that look like this. And our original thought was that, turkeys are digging up to get the acorns, but I've never seen them do it in a straight line like this.
Mm-hmm.
And you can kind of see as it gets closer to where I took the picture from, there's actually a pile of needles and and
Right.
leaves there. So I would say that we found about 5 of these.
What time of year was this? Is this in the fall? It looks like the leaves are
So
all
this is
down.
fall. So it was actually November 22nd, 2 years ago.
Okay. And it looks like there's in the middle of the arc, there's a tree. I can't tell if that small sapling's been scraped or if that's just dead and the bark's peeling off. Do you know, or do you remember?
I don't remember, but just looking at it, I'm pretty sure it's dead.
Okay. To be honest, I don't know what this is right at hand. It does remind me what I do sometimes when I'm teaching tracking, or actually get to the trailing aspect of it, not so much the track, but the trailing. I'll take like a 2x4 or a log and drive a lot of big nails in it, and I'll just drag it behind me through the forest, and I'll leave a mark very much like this. And that's easy for beginner trackers to follow. But as I get more proficient, I take the nails out, or I do a smaller and smaller limb. And then after a while, I have just a small little dowel or a small little twig that I'm dragging behind me. And over time, the trackers can start to find their search image, what they're looking for. And they can trace a very small stick being dragged behind me. And then if you start bopping it up and down, so it's not making direct contact the whole time, it's a good way to train someone as well. And that's kind of what this looks like. Something was drugged through there. I don't know if this is a high use area, if some kids were playing in the area, if it was a deer.
It's
That's why I was
pretty
asking
far
about
away from like the picnic area. Probably
Okay.
a couple of miles away from that.
Hmm.
And this was probably a good 50 feet off trail. We noticed it, and so we went to go.
And then you said there's a couple of them.
There was about 3 of them.
All right. So my first thing, with the timing, with the location, time of the year, and what I'm seeing, and this is just a guess, there's a strong probability that 2 bucks were out there having a challenge match, and one of them was being pushed around a little bit. But I don't know for sure.
It's the best explanation I've heard so far. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I wish I had known the flashlight trick at that point, because I have what I think was a track, but the picture is terrible. You can't tell anything from it.
Yeah, I know something like this. You
Really helpful.
need to do a little bit more sleuthing to figure out a little bit more the clues that are in the area.
We need dirt time here.
Dirt time, and it's good to get. Whenever you are doing dirt time, you actually want to be on your hands and knees. You want to be down there close. Sometimes your face is right
so
at the ground
fascinated.
level.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Anytime. Well, happy holidays, everyone.
Okay,
Stay
thank
warm,
you.
enjoy the snow, and maybe I'll see y'all somewhere around.
Yeah, happy holidays, everyone. We have our next one, probably the 2nd or the 4th Tuesday of January. We'll skip the 2nd Tuesday. I still have many openings, February, March, April, May. So if anybody wants to present, please shoot me an email and we'll get you on the calendar. Help us keep this going. It's been a great learning experience, I think, for everybody. And it's great to be able to touch base with y'all once in a while. So take care and happy holidays. Thanks for joining.